My conversation today with Eilish McColgan was one of my favorites. As a three-time Olympian and one of the most decorated Scottish athletes of all time, Eilish shares how growing up in an elite running family has shaped her mindset towards the sport. Coming off of a pretty serious injury a bit over a year ago, Eilish shares what this last year has looked like and goes deep into detail with us about her return to run program using Lever. I think you will love this conversation as much as I did. All right. Today we have a three-time Olympian, multiple-time medalist at the European Championship and Commonwealth Games, and the national record holder from pretty much the 3K all the way up to the half marathon. Eilish McColgan, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're absolutely excited about this conversation today. Obviously, known your name in the sport for a while now, and you've just continued to see success after success for, I feel like, a couple of decades now. So I want to know your secret today. But before we jump into that piece, we start every single podcast off with a question, and the question is, what's the why behind why you run?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it's always just been something like a bit of a mental release. Like even as a kid, I just enjoyed being outdoors in the fresh air, especially living in Scotland. Like it was cold, it was wet, it was muddy. Like that was just what I enjoyed. I liked it. It's an individual sport as well. Like you rely on yourself, which I liked. But yeah, I think for me, the why is just for the enjoyment. It's hard to explain. I just love being outdoors and in the fresh air.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, do you just like indoor track season then compared to the outdoor season?
Do you know, I did indoors a little bit as a kid and then a little bit as I was older as well. But I think it's running in general. For me, it's a mental release of just being able to run, and you can choose how fast you go, how slow you go. There's something about pushing yourself and trying to get the best out of yourself, which certainly, yeah, I think that's definitely what motivates me. I'm not someone who's like goes to bed like dreaming of becoming an Olympic champion or anything like that. Like I've never ever been that type of person. Like I literally just enjoy trying to run my own PB, whether I come like first in a race or last in a race, but I've ran a PB. That for me is what is the motivating factor. I like feeling of pushing yourself and knowing that you've done it.
Yeah, and I feel like you also got an early start because you grew up in a family of runners, and so
Yeah.
mom and dad both solid runners. Can you
Mhm.
talk about what that was like growing up in a family of pretty well known
Yeah,
runners?
yeah. I mean, my mum was world champion in '91, and my dad had gone to world championships as well. And so, to be honest, I like as much as they were professional athletes, like I was quite unaware of it. Like they never had medals out around the house or showed me their races online or videos of the races. Like I never really saw any of that. I just remember being away in certain different locations. Like we used to go to Florida a lot because my mum would train in Gainesville with the heat and humidity. She never really went to altitude, but that was what she did instead. But for me, when we went there, it was just a holiday. Like I didn't really know that my mum and dad were out sort of training hard and working towards world championships or Olympic games. Like for me, I was just in the sun and on holiday. I didn't really think anything of it. And it wasn't really till I went to primary, sort of high school, the end of primary school, that I realized like not everyone's parents go out for runs and keep fit and active. Like that was quite weird and it wasn't a normal job.
Yeah.
And yeah, I suppose I really became a little bit more aware probably around high school, 12, 13, 14. I started being a bit like, oh, like my mum's actually quite a good runner and people know who she is. So I think that was good in a way that they shielded me from it because I never felt a pressure to get into it. I started to run because I enjoyed it. My PE teacher put me into it and I loved being part of the club system in the UK that we have, and that for me was the biggest thing, friends and just the fun that we had at training. Never really thought too far ahead about the sort of professional side of it. And I think that really helped. My mum and dad definitely shielded me away from that.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of answering my next question around like pressure. Like, did your parents put any pressure on you then to become a runner, or was
Not
it
at all.
your decision?
Yeah, never ever. Like my mum had always said she didn't ever want to force me into it. And um I joined the club sort of off my own accord. I'd done really well in like a local sort of cross country race, and asked me to go along as like almost like a little talent scout, but really they pick like the top 15 kids and just tell you to come along to the club. And I remember begging my mum and dad to take me along to the local Dundee Hawkle Harriers. And I just had to beg and beg, beg. Mum was like, oh, we'll see. Like, and I remember saying, if you stick at it for like X amount of months, then she would maybe come down and start taking over a little bit more of the coaching, because we never really had a proper sort of distance coach down there. So I started off and I did everything. I did high jump, javelin, sprint hurdles, long jump. But for me, it was like the longer events, 800 meters and 1500s, I really enjoyed. And yeah, that was it. I stuck at the club for so many months, and then my mum started to coach me down there, and we just went from strength to strength. But that pressure never came from my family. It always came from journalists and media, or that was sort of the people that would always say, oh, your mum's a world champion. What are you going to do? Or how do you think you can be as fast as your mum? Like, those questions always came from outside of the family and not actually my family.
Wow. And I'm guessing those questions came pretty early, like 12, 13, when you started seeing
Yeah.
success.
Yeah, pretty much as soon as I joined the club and started doing like races across Scotland and certainly the UK as well. Like, I won like a national cross country down in England when I was under 13. And so that sort of catapulted me a little bit into like the sort of athletics magazines at the time and media. And then obviously the name McColgan then just sort of ran from there. So there was always like I think they always felt like I should just win everything then from then onwards, but that's certainly not the way my career took. And it took me from probably winning that national title at under 13 until the age of 21 to actually represent Britain at a major championship. So yeah, it's been a long journey to get that point. And yeah, the pressure has certainly never come from my family.
Yeah, that's really great. It seems like that's probably one of the reasons why you stuck with your mom as a coach. Maybe I'm reading a little bit into that, but have you been working with your mom all the way from today, like from the beginning all the way through today?
Pretty much, yeah. From the moment I decided that I sort of wanted to do athletics and distance running, yeah, my mum's been my coach the whole way through. I've never had another coach. I feel very fortunate, like, to have somebody that completely understands the sport, who's competed at that top level, also being a female athlete and had to navigate that side of things too. Now I'd say over the last couple of years it's a little bit different, because my partner Michael is with me everywhere we go. So since the pandemic, like, we've traveled 24/7. We're in each other's pockets all the time, and so the sort of dynamic of the coaching situation has definitely evolved a little bit, just in the sense that he's the one probably on the ground helping make those day-to-day decisions of, do you know, if I look tired or if I'm looking good, then he'll add something on, or if I'm looking tired, he'll sort of remove things. So I sort of now rely on my mum setting the overall program, and then there being a real constant discussion between myself, Michael, and my mum as to day what we sort of change and adapt. And I think that's really worked well, because it's allowed me to, yeah, I need someone to help make the harder decisions. Like, as an athlete, I always want to keep pushing. I want to do more. I maybe, yeah, when you're a bit tired or you're sick, do you know what I mean, that you're always inclined to want to just try and push. Do you know what I mean? That's why we're got to the level we have done. But at the same time, it's very easy to sort of tip over that edge. And so that's definitely where I rely on Michael day to day to help make those decisions, to sort of scale things back a little bit. Especially when my mum, I mean, me and my mum obviously don't see each other very often. She lives on a completely different continent to myself. So it's, yeah, I definitely rely on Michael being like the middleman in between all that.
Seems like a good setup. Keep it in the family. Sounds like your mom may have been grooming Michael for a bit too, to make sure he's ready for the position. But obviously, you've had a lot of success in your career. And I think one of the things that's most notable is, you know, recently I was looking at some of the national records that you have, and, you know, starting in like 2021, you had the track 5K national record. And then in 2022, you get the road 5K, 10K, 15K, and 20K record. And then this last year, 2023, early 2023, you got the 10K and the half marathon national record. I feel like that's a fairly impressive stat, knowing you've like had a very accomplished 2 decades. What do you attribute that to? Like 2 decades, 10, 20 years of running, and you like you continue getting better. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot over the last, say, 2 decades in the sport. I think I made a lot of mistakes early on in my career. I stayed probably in the steeplechase a lot longer than I should have done as well. So I feel like confidence wise for me, I was always very unconfident, which is why I probably went towards the steeplechase. You know, less people did it. It was easier to qualify for national championships. Like I never felt like I was good enough on the flat distances. I felt like I was, yeah, just maybe not quite good enough to make that sort of level. But I had a couple of really bad injuries early on, and those gave me a lot of strength. I think I learned a lot from those as well, of how to overcome and be a bit more resilient. And then confidence grew from that. I thought, right, I now need to be good enough over the flat distances, not shy away from them too much. Um, but I'd say I think definitely having Michael over the last couple of years has made a big difference as well. I think helping me, as I said, make those day-to-day decisions where I was probably trying to make them myself and just go out and run myself into the ground all the time. And now I have a much better balance with my training of recovery, of having a day off every week, using things like the lever, just small things like that, do you know, and just reducing my load. I cross train a lot more. So cross training is a huge part of my program. I'd say over the last 5 years, that's been implemented and has just completely changed the way that I train. I used to try and run twice a day, most days when I was in the steeplechase, and it just didn't work for me. Do you know, I was sort of trying to follow what I saw other female athletes doing because I knew that they were training twice a day, every day. They were trying to get up to 80, 90 miles a week. And I thought, well, I'll try and do that. Like, I'll get stronger. I'll be able to do that. But I just wasn't able to sustain it. So we completely changed my training. And year on year, we've sort of built on that. We started very low level and then we've added in a bit more cross training and a bit more miles, changed my whole, if you look to my training from now to even what it was 3 years ago, it's completely evolved again. So I think it's taken us like a lot longer to get to that final bit of learning what works for me and what doesn't. I don't say I have any regrets in the sport because I don't want to ever retire and feel like I've got any regrets, but do I wish I knew what I knew now and how that I train and what works for me like 10 years ago? Then yeah, it would have saved me a hell of a lot of tears and heartache. But I think that's why I'm really interested now, once I obviously do retire, to make sure that younger athletes don't fall into the same mistakes that I made. And waste time, because it was probably a lot of wasted time throughout my earlier years. Certainly through 2011, when I first made my first GB team, probably right the way through until 2020, probably 2019, I started changing things and then cross training a lot more. So yeah, there's a lot of changes I wish we'd made a lot earlier, but it is what it is. So I have to just accept it now. And I'm lucky to see athletes like, Sarah Hall, Edna Kiplagat the other day, like coming third in Boston at the age of 44.
Yeah.
Like if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd think, oh shit, I've wasted so many years. But now I think, well, okay, maybe I still have an extra 5 years. Maybe I've still got another 10 years of Medley Kiplagat. So I'm trying to shift my mindset a little bit as well and not think you've lost those years, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I feel like just from a maturity standpoint too, it sounds like obviously early on you almost think you can do whatever you want and get away with it, and then what happens is like you just run into those roadblocks and get setbacks with injuries and things like that. Like obviously, I would love to have the knowledge I have today 10 years ago too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, do you think that was just like part of your growth as well? Like, it'd be hard to be where you're at today without having those setbacks from 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think so. And also I just had like a really normal, like I went to university, I enjoyed university, I was going out partying with everyone, like everyone else. I was a typical student. I was eating kebabs and drinking alcohol 6 days a week. Like I wasn't a professional athlete, and that's like this new generation of athletes is different to nowadays as well. So I have to remember that too. Like, yes, I've been in the sport for like 2 decades, but I wasn't really taking it seriously. Like it wasn't a job to me. Like I wasn't getting paid to do this. Like it's only really on the last, as I said, maybe the last 5 or 6 years that I've been like, actually, this is a job now. Like I have to take this seriously. I have to start looking after myself. I have to go to bed early a bit at night. I have to start doing my stretches and my foam rolling and eating a bit better. Before that, it was a hobby for me. And I think that's the difference too. Like people come into it now. There's collegiate athletes in the US that are 18, 19, 20, 19, 20, but they're professional athletes, you know, they're training hard and they're doing it properly. So maybe that's why I have had such a long career, because I'd say really it's only the last so many years that I've really matured into it and actually started taking this as a proper job and a profession. And again, yeah, maybe you sort of look back at that and think, oh, was that the right thing to do? But I have no regrets. Like I really enjoyed my time at university. Like I don't feel I've had to like sacrifice my life. A lot of the youngsters now feel like they get to the Olympics and they've had to sacrifice so much of their friendships or like just general life in order to get to that sort of peak goal of theirs. And yeah, mine is happening a lot later in life, but I have no regrets of that sort of earlier part. As I said, it was a hobby. It was a hobby to me. So why would I do it as a professional job when it wasn't a job at that point? So yeah, things have really changed. As I said, over the last couple of years, I've certainly matured a lot, and now believing that this is a full-time, this is a serious job for me. That's certainly been a big shift in mindset as well.
I feel like not many people could say what you just said there about being at the top of their sport in the world and not feeling like they've had to sacrifice too much.
Yeah.
Like obviously there are the days, day in and day out sacrifices that you do make, but it's that mentality of not having, you don't feel like you've had to sacrifice. Like a lot of, I'd say most athletes almost take pride in the sacrifices that they make, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting to me is I feel like some of that also comes with taking a little expectations off your back as well, so that you can go perform, like, you know, your body can go perform.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I've learned an awful lot again from my mum. Like I remember my mum so many years back said, like, she obviously had come silver at the Olympic Games, world champion, and she felt like she had sacrificed just so much to get to there, and she almost was questioning, like, was it worth it? And that to me was really sad. Like it just made me, I don't know. It's a really weird feeling, because I thought I wanted my mum to know how incredible she was. I was like, wow, like you're Olympic medalist. You've now gone on to have 5 kids. Like it's incredible what you've achieved. But she didn't quite see it in that same light. And that's probably the first time I remember thinking, yeah, I don't ever want to feel like that. And I remember speaking again to another Olympic medalist from GB, and she had sort of said the same. She'd recently come out in the media saying that she did not think her Olympic medal was worth the sacrifice, and the sacrifice for her was she was having to sort of really strict diet, having to not really socialize with friends, and just put every like 100% into her event. And again, I remember thinking, yeah, I don't ever want to feel like that. You know, I want to know that I haven't. Yeah, of course there's sacrifices, but I don't ever want to feel like I've like lost my life or lost the fun or lost that normality. Like I want to be able to go to a restaurant with my family or my partner and eat whatever I want and not think, oh my God, I can't have this tonight because I've got the Olympic Games coming up in so many months. I want to keep like a normality within my life. And maybe that means that, yeah, I don't ever win an Olympic medal. And that's totally cool with me. Like, that's fine. Like, I know that at least I've tried, you know, I've worked hard. I've given it what I'm willing to give. But at the same time, I'm not going to sacrifice on certain parts of my life so that further down the line, I don't feel it's worth it. It's just not a mindset I've ever wanted to get into, to be honest. And yeah, I feel like I want to stick by that. And at the end of my career, if I win a global medal, of course I'll be over the moon. But if I don't, I'll be really proud of everything I've done up until to this point.
Yeah, I'm loving this conversation with you. I feel like it's so healthy, and it's also a fresh air, like hearing what you're saying at the level that you're at. And I would love to just understand then, because like you definitely, like I said, you have this incredible perspective towards, the success that you've had and like what's coming up also for you. But I would love to understand, if we peel it back a little bit, you've obviously had some pretty big years of setbacks, like 2011, 2014, a couple of big injuries, this last year since the London Marathon, another big injury. Like, what is your perspective, and like, where's your mindset at when you go through such a big couple big years of setbacks like those?
Yeah, I think the ones earlier in my career, like 2011 was particularly challenging because I just sort of gone from being like student athlete, not really taking it seriously. And then I decided the Olympics was coming around in 2012 and it was in London. And I just randomly got this thought into my head that I wanted to go to the Olympic Games. And so I did. I really started to like knuckle down. I stopped going out partying and stopped drinking. I just changed like changed my diet. I started training a little bit more focus on my training and recovery and going to bed at proper hours and not trying to cram in revision and have like 3 hours of sleep a night. Like, it just wasn't conducive to obviously running well. So I did all that and I made all these really good changes for my athletics. And then I suffered a really big injury because I'd probably done it all a little bit too quick. Do you know what I mean? I'd ramped up my training, got really excited. I changed so many things all at once. And then I had a really bad fracture during a race. Actually, it was a bit of a freak accident. I completely shattered my navicular bone. So I had to have surgery and they put 5 screws and a metal plate into my left foot. And I found that tough because I felt like, I've made all these good changes and I'm doing things properly now. I'm actually looking after myself. And yet I've had this big injury. Like, why has that happened? But now I can sort of see why. I know why it happened. I ramped up things far too quickly. And also in the steeplechase, I didn't really take into account the extra impact in that event. It's such a grueling event. And if you've never been in a gym before, I'd never done gym work before. I wasn't robust enough to take on that event. So now I can understand why that happened. But I think the injury certainly gave me a lot of mental resilience because I decided that even though I was injured, I still believed I could do it. I still believed that I could make the Olympic Games. And I did. And I got there. I wasn't in the best shape of my life. I was obviously pretty disappointed with my performance there, but I had made it. And that was a huge goal of mine. My first ever Olympic Games, age of 21, couldn't believe it. Like, the 80,000 spectators in this stadium, it was just absolutely nuts. And it's still to this day probably one of the best memories I've ever had. Even though I didn't perform well, it still is just this overwhelming feeling of being proud and knowing that I had worked hard to get to that point. But I think that one injury then really helped later on because nothing ever was as hard as that, was as difficult as that at like the early stage of my career. And I always felt like I'll overcome whatever gets thrown my way. And to be honest, I've actually been really lucky the last 7 years now, certainly since moving away from the steeplechase, removing that sort of impact and reducing my mileage down. I haven't had a major injury where I've missed a season in 7 years. I've made every GB team in the last 7 years, which is something I'm really proud of because we changed a lot of my training. I started looking after myself a lot more. And sleep, recovery, all of those things were of much more importance and it's paid off. I was obviously disappointed last year to have had another injury, but when I look at it, like, that was my first proper injury in 7 years. Of course, I've had like little muscle tweaks and things, but I haven't ever missed a chance. I've always managed to get myself back in time and have a season. I've had a full season, track season, and then right into a road season, which isn't easy to do. But last year I was really disappointed to have had that was my first season out. Obviously came out at the start of the year great. March and April set huge PBs. And then that was it. Missed London, missed the World Champs, and missed everything subsequently after that. And still, I'm on the comeback trail now of all of that injury. But I think, again, that's part and parcel of being an athlete and pushing yourself. Like, we sort of knew that we had upped training again, and that's where those 2 big performances came from. It's almost accepting that if you are going to like push that line a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? We'd got really comfortable the last 7 years. It was like we knew the training that works. I was able to sustain it. I was managing it, but it was like, well, how do we sort of push that on a little bit more? And I think, again, I've learned an awful lot from that, of what worked, what maybe didn't work. And And I think that's something that we'll definitely look to sort of implement even this year. I need to obviously gradually build it back up to that point. But certainly I think a big part of that injury as well was probably swapping around and testing too many shoes as well. Obviously I have a sponsor, and so part of that is testing new prototype shoes and what they feel like and how they respond in different training sessions. But I think it was probably just a little bit of bad timing as I've upped my training, and then you add in this sort of extra additional factor. It was probably just a little bit too much for my body at that time. So that's something we've certainly learned from as well, not to be chopping and changing too many things all at once.
And upping your training, was that really just to get yourself ready for your first marathon?
Yeah, it was. That was really what that was about, because it's all good and well being like really consistent over 50, 60 miles a week. But I was very aware that that could get me around a 5K and a 10K, and even a half, it gets me around a half, but it's my limit. Do you know what I mean? The half really was my limit there. So it was, how do we get round to make sure I can really be robust enough and legs strong enough to get round a marathon? So we had up the training, the general volume of my week, even the cross training as well. As I said, we sort of maybe did a little bit too much all at once, and then testing the shoes, it was like another factor thrown in, and altitude. So when I look back now, I think, yeah, maybe there was a lot of things all at once. We maybe should have gone bit by bit by bit gradually, but I suppose London Marathon was coming around a little bit quicker than perhaps we should have gave ourselves a little bit more time to do that build. But there's no doubt that I think I was managing a higher volume quite well. So I do think we need to, that's certainly where I'll try and get back to again. But maybe I just don't see myself ever being an athlete who's going to be running like 100 miles a week, 100 plus miles a week. I just don't think that'll ever be me. I think I'm definitely going to have to be happy sitting around 80 to 90, and cross training probably on top of that. But certainly that would be my max heading into hopefully another marathon at some point.
Yeah, at some point, obviously Olympic year this year, so a lot to get ready for this year. But real quick, what is your go-to cross training?
So I actually switch between the arc trainer and the elliptical. I like both of them, to be honest. I try to, again, sometimes I'll be on the bike and the swimming pool, but to be honest, I prefer leaving aqua jogging for when I'm like actually injured. When I'm fit and healthy, I'll try and stick on just a cross trainer as much as I can. And then using the lever as well as like my easier days, so that I'm not, if I've just got a 5, 6 mile, 7 mile easy run, instead of being that impacting outside, I'll get on the treadmill. And that's been a nice way to like still keep a running motion, but reduce the impact. Because sometimes the cross trainers, if you're in certain gyms, the motion of it is perhaps a little bit awkward, and it tightens your quads or hamstrings in different ways that you normally wouldn't use running. So I try to keep a running motion as much as I can. So whether that's lever, whether that's arc trainer or the elliptical, I find that those have been like the better movement patterns for me.
Yeah. And so just to tap into that, so London was nearly a year ago, the London Marathon, we pulled out nearly a year ago before that race. What has your last year looked like? Did you how long did you take off completely after your injury last year?
Yeah, so it was a bit stop-start. I was running right up until the World Championships in Budapest, but it was still not, it wasn't good enough to be able to put on a pair of spikes and race. I was able to, again, like stop, start, and I was told that I wasn't doing any damage. They said like there wasn't really anything there, and then just to keep going. So I did that, and then obviously after Budapest, it was apparent that I probably was doing some damage by running on it. So we took, I think I must have ended up having probably about 4 or 5 months, maybe even longer than that. It's from about October time right the way through to January. I wasn't doing any running at all. I had a bit of time off completely, and then I was on aqua jogging only for a good couple months, and then built back the spin bike, and then onto the cross trainer, and then eventually onto the lever. But then I had to stop again It's just been a nightmare, to be honest. It's hard for me to go into it because I just feel like I'm not fully over it all either. There's been a lot of misdiagnoses, a lot of misread scans, a lot of injections that were in the wrong area entirely, and then that set me back even longer. So I think mentally it's been probably up there with one of the most challenging years I've had. But now I feel I'm moving in the right direction again. I'm on track. I'm twice a week on the track at the moment. I'm running most days. I still have a day on the lever and I still have a day off. General volume's up to about 50 miles at the moment, which I'm actually really happy with. Like, considering the amount of time I've had off, like I'm really pleased to just be doing like a normal week, or certainly feel like a runner again, which is nice. But it's something that's not just going to go away straight away. Like, it's every day it gets a little bit better. It's like a tiny little 1% improvement, which can be frustrating because you just want it to be gone. Do you know, you want to be pain free, you want to be like full 100% going for it. But yeah, I have to just be really patient with that and just be happy that, as I said, I'm doing 2 really hard track sessions every week and it's still getting better. So there hasn't been any setbacks since January. I've been able to really, it was a very slow build. Like, we took it incredibly slow, even on the lever. I was doing minute walk, minute jog at probably around 70% of my body weight, maybe even a little bit lower than that. And we gradually built that up to then obviously 100%. So we purposely took the extra time, the extra months. Even in Olympic year, I was like, nope, I want to do this properly. I want to make sure that I give myself the time that I need and don't rush anything to get back. Because there can be a tendency in Olympic year, generally, to want to rush and push things. But we've been really sensible with that. And I think that's why I'm in a really good place now, where out in Colorado, finally here. We've delayed our camp by a couple of months, but yeah, at altitude again, and back into a relatively normal program, which is great.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the state. We love it here too. So glad you're here. Yeah. And like you said, so coming to an altitude camp obviously has to probably, in your mind at least, build a little bit more confidence. Like, hey, this is now back to more regularly structured training, which is great. And you mentioned two hard track workouts a week. You're still offloading a couple times a week as well. Yeah. And then I think some of the beauty of where you're at today is you do have the standards for this summer already. So that has to take some pressure off of your mindset kind of leading up the next 2 months or so.
Yeah, a little bit. I think, I mean, the hardest part is getting a qualifying time. There's not a huge amount of 10K races of that high level across the world. So to be able to have my time and know that that's banked is definitely a good feeling. Obviously, because I've been injured, I still need to show fitness and form towards my federation. So I have until the end of June to do that. We have our like British Championships the very end of June. So it'll be up to me to try and prove that I don't need to be like breaking records and setting PBs, but I certainly need to show that I am moving towards that Olympic standard again, or certainly within the scope of being in that sort of shape for the Olympics. So right now, I'm not even thinking about any races. I haven't set any. I've obviously entered a few to make sure that my name's down, but I haven't even set a schedule of what we're actually going to aim for. Right now, my absolute only priority is just training. I've been back into sort of harder interval sessions for the last 6 weeks. And so for me now, the priority is just ticking off every single week as it comes, and just really focusing on right now rather than worrying too far in the future. Obviously, I would love to be at the Olympic Games. I do think I'm capable of getting down to that time by then, but it's going to be tight. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be, there's definitely going to be, I'll be up against it fitness wise. But I'm in no better place now to be at altitude. I know I run really strongly off altitude. I know it works for me. We know the sort of training that I need to follow in order to get back into that shape. So I think that's probably one of the easiest bits, is that I already know it works. Do you mean I've done it the last so many years? It's just that I now need to implement that and not have any further setbacks from now to then. But this is like a fun part. It's tough, like it's horrible doing the sessions, but it's nice to see like week on week, you see improvements. Like one point you can't even run a 5:30-minute mile, and then the next minute you're running a 5-minute mile, and you think, wow, like that's 30 seconds in the space of a couple of weeks. And it's like you can see that improvement. That's the exciting bit. I'm trying not to dwell too much on, but I used to run these splits and these times, and not looking at my training diaries from previous years too much, but just being excited in this current moment.
Yeah, and you're definitely at a place too where you're trusting yourself is going to be huge, because you can run those times already, right? And so I will absolutely include your Instagram and things for people to follow your Olympic build. I think it's going to be a really exciting year for you, and I definitely believe you've got just a really exciting season ahead. But also just for our audience, just to be able to take something away really tangibly from this conversation is, how are you today then incorporating it? Obviously a couple of days a week to offload, but are those for recovery runs then, or are you how are you using it today, and then how do you plan on continue using it when you are fully back?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit different over the last couple of months. Obviously I started on the lever, as I said, doing like minute walk, minute jog, minute walk, minute jog, and then I built that up to doing sort of tempo efforts. I did like 5 by a mile at tempo, around about 80% of my body weight, and that was sort of one of the first faster intervals I did. And again, I just gradually started to nudge that on. So my sessions at the very beginning were actually on the lever, and then I transferred to running outdoors, easy running outdoors, but sessions on the lever. So again, to just keep that reduced impact. And that really helped, I think, because then when it came to running sessions outside, I was even mentally then confident that my body was ready to do it, because I think that was quite a large part of it, was probably mental as well. When you've had a lot of time off, you don't want to hurt anything again or do something wrong. So now things have sort of switched the other way. So a lot of my running now is outside. All the intervals are outside. And now it's just, I'm using the lever for easy running. So easy days, recovery days. Instead of me doing like a 5 mile easy outside, I'll just do it on the lever. I'm still getting the same benefit from that, Jim, but it's certainly better than having, I used to have just a full cross train day, so a full offload day. So it's a little bit more impact on that. It's obviously more a running style as well. So it's keeping me a little bit closer to running, so that eventually then I can get back to upping that mileage to say 60, 70 miles, but still incorporating the lever within that too. So yeah, that's where I'm at just now. And I think even when I'm fully fit in the summer, I have my lever with me here in Springs. I'll take it to Font-Romeu, which is our base in France for the summer. And it'll most likely be used for recovery days and offload days. Trying to just, as I said, increase my mileage a little bit, but still keeping a little bit of the offload there. That for me will be a priority this summer.
It sounds like it might be a good friend to you too next time you do a marathon build, to get your back up to that 80-90. So, this has been great. I really have appreciated the conversation. I love your approach and your mentality that you take to the sport. I think it's one of the healthiest approaches that I've heard in a long time. So thank you for sharing everything you did. And we are very excited to follow your Paris build.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for your time.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about incorporating a lever system into your training, follow us on Instagram @levermovement, or even follow me on Strava to learn how I incorporate lever into my training for ultras. Until next time, keep running.